welcome. I'm just going to give 1 minute to allow most of our attendees to come before I start the introductions.
Perfect.
Hello and welcome once again. My name is Gagba Sheponiche Yahaya, and I'm the training coordinator with the Temple Small Business and Development Center. At the Temple Small Business and Development Center, help small businesses start and grow. We offer free one-on-one consulting and a variety of low to no cost webinars. And we are proud to be part of the nationally accredited network of the Small Business and Development Centers, which has over 1,000 networks across the United States of America. You are here this afternoon for a webinar on the things you should know about website technology. A copy of the PowerPoint and a link to the recording will be sent to all the attendees. However, we always encourage you to drop your question on the Q&A box. Without further ado, please allow me to welcome Ms. Jane even as she takes over the floor for the presentation. Ms. Jane, you're welcome once again.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me again. So today we're going to talk about website technology that you should know about. Hi, I'm Jane. I'm a co-founder and creative director of BrandSwan. I've been designing websites since the 90s, which is over 19 years. I specialize in SEO. And I'm a front-end web developer. So that's a little bit about how I got this presentation. So you wouldn't expect that out of me, but here I am. That's my bread and butter. So at BrandSwan, we help small businesses, professionals, and nonprofits break away from the flock through story-driven branding, web design, and marketing. So that's really what we do. So today we're going to talk about the parts of a website, which I kind of worked in because I think that's important to kind of understand the other things, which is where to register your domain name, how to choose a web host, and SSL certificates and why they're important. So tell me in chat, guys, who here went to my web security webinar recently? Anybody here? I'm curious if there's any same faces. Just feel free to drop it in chat. I'm just curious. But if you haven't seen me before, I'm sorry. No. If you haven't seen me before, I look forward to getting to know you. Okay, so let's talk about what makes up a website. You have your domain name, which I'm going to use our company as an example, brandswan.com. You have that domain name. So you have an idea of it. And so you go and you try to see if that domain name is available. And I will give you some companies that you can go to where you can do a search. And it will also give you some alternatives as well. So let's say you register your domain at GoDaddy and you buy brandswan.com and it's yours and you're excited. That's your domain name. And you never really buy a domain name like to own. You really lease it for life, unfortunately. You just kind of pay for it forever. And that price can range from $12 to $30, depending on what kind of package you get. So once you register your domain name, you can also choose to change where the domain control is. And this is where, when I was a baby web designer, I got a little confused. So the domain registrar is where you bought the domain. And the domain control is where you tell the domain where to put all the records on it. So I'm going to go into that in a little bit more detail. Then, of course, you have your hosting account where your website lives. So what's a domain control? How does that differentiate between a domain registrar? So when you register your domain name, there's something called name servers, and these are records where your domain lives. So this record lets the internet know where your website is, where your email is, and a bunch of other stuff. So your domain registrar and your domain control can be at two different companies. Typically, if it's not at the domain registrar, then it's usually at the the name servers of your hosting company. So it's very rare is there ever like a third party doing it, unless maybe there was a transition where you used to host here, but now you don't anymore. So there's this weird, awkward third person. But yes, and you have to be careful because some hosting companies, if you leave them, they don't really want to store your domain records. So then you have to move it anyway. And we'll talk more about that. So domain registrar is where you bought it. And that has the ultimate control because you can tell it where to get the records from. And again, the records can live in a variety of places, but you can always revoke that and bring the records back to the domain registrar. So if you have questions about that, please drop it in the Q&A and I will get to that when we I have a blocked out for you. Okay, so this is a great analogy. Well, I might be biased because I made it up, but I like to think of the website as a library. And by library, I mean an older library. I'm not sure if the kids still have library card catalogs or it's all on a computer, so bear with me. But your domain name is basically the card catalog. It tells you where the book is located on what shelf. And for those who don't know, the library card catalog is a slip of paper with a book title and it tells you where it lives in the library. The book is your website and it shares that shelf with other books. So the shelf is your hosting account. So the domain name is a card catalog, where it lives. Your website is a book on the shelf and the shelf is your hosting account. So where is your site? Let's say maybe you're inheriting an old company website and you're not sure where to even begin to gain access to it. What I like to do is use something called Whois. It's a database that kind of gives you a lot of answers. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. Okay, so this is what I use when a client is like, I have no idea where my site is. Like, okay, I got this. So I'm gonna go ahead and use mine as an example. And I'm gonna search for it. Okay, so a lot of gobbledygook, right? So what this says is that my domain name is registered at Google. It even tells us when I registered it, when it expires, and when it was updated. The status, when it says client transfer prohibited, that means that the domain name's locked and can't be transferred. Your name servers, now this is where your records live. And it happens to also be on Google. It talks about the registrant, who they are. Now, because I have privacy activated, you can't see, you know, Jane Clark or Brand Swan, nothing. You don't have to have that. It's certainly a bonus because a lot of people use these to, let me see here, kind of solicit you. So they're like, okay, this person's domain name is probably up soon. Let's send them a letter in the mail that says, hey, renew your domain name. But really what you're doing is you're registering it with a new registrar. So be careful with those type of letters. Make sure that who you're paying is actually where your domain name is registered. We talked about name servers. Yeah, so there's a lot of information here, but those are really the big things. One, where it's registered. Two, where the name servers are, because this is where you have to update the DNS. And then who the contact is, all that's good stuff. Okay. Going back to the presentation, let's talk a bit more about those domain names. So what's really exciting about today is that there are so many website extensions, and they are .com, .net, .org, .biz, .edu, .gov. Now, certain ones, like for example, .gov, you have to be a government agency in order to have that. So that builds a little bit of trust, right? .finance, I mean, anyone can really have that, but obviously you think of finance when you type in that domain name. .rocks, .bike, .photography. Mine is .design, .agency. There's .me. There's so many. There's hundreds, guys. But I kind of want to give you a little bit of a tip here, because when we're looking to make a name for ourselves and pick a domain name, we obviously want the domain name that we want. For example, let's say your company name is, brand Swan marketing, terrible. But when you type in brandswan.com, it's taken, right? What do? What some people will do is buy brandswan.biz, brandswan.net. And I kind of call that the poor man's version of a .com. It has nothing to do with money, but you couldn't get it, so you settled for a .net and a .biz. And they're one of the oldest extensions out there, but they kind of have the reputation of, oh, you couldn't get a .com, so now you're a .net or a .biz. So I would actually tend to ignore that. I wouldn't even try to get it a .net or a .biz. What I would try to do is revise that domain name so that it's available in .com. Now, we bought brandswan.design actually, because .com wasn't taken, but it was taken actually. So we bought the .design, but we loved it, you know, because we're a design company and it just really made sense. And when we got a little bit bigger, when we were looking at brandswan.com, like we're just kind of stalking it a little bit, and we noticed that the price they were selling it for was $1,200 or $1,500, something like that. Now that's a lot for a startup company, right, guys? Like $1,500 for a domain name, whew. But I've seen them go well above like 10,000. So I was thinking, brand clarity and you know, to have that brand as a .com, I think we should invest in that. And I did a little bit of negotiating and got it for $1,200, and that was worth it to us. So even though we still use our .design name, now it looks like the .design was intentional. So again, if your name is taken, look about making a new brand name, and that kind of thing. Now, if a domain name is taken and you want to kind of, you know, buy it from the owner, usually there is a box that says like, buy this domain name. And sometimes what they'll do, like for example, GoDaddy will go back and say, hey, we have a client who wants your domain name. Do you want to sell it? And then you can buy it that way. Sometimes these companies have, like if you go to the domain, like actually in the browser, it'll tell you that it's been parked, and if you want to buy it, contact them there. So there are companies since the 90s who literally just come up with like really good names and they take them all up and then they sell them for lots of money. It's like a business all on its own. So when picking a website, you want to make sure that it's not going to be a conflict of interest. And what I mean by that is, let's say brandswan.com, again, taken. You're like, oh man, so I'm going to do brandswan.biz. Well, what if that brandswan.com reputation goes south and now you're connected to it? So taking the same name, it can be problematic from a branding standpoint. So just think about that. We can also get really creative with domain names. For example, I had a client, BavarianBakery.com was taken. That's their name. So how about we do yourfavoritebakery.com? So now we've turned into a cute little like marketing thing, even though we couldn't get our company name as a .com. So there's a lot of other solutions to that. Okay, so I'm going to show you my top 5 in a lot of these things, just based on the experience that I've had. But I recommend that you buy your domain name separately from your hosting company if it's not on my top 5. A lot of times it's because your hosting company, typically they just specialize in hosting. You know, they're not really great domain registrars. They kind of let you buy it as a courtesy. But if you were to move your site from your hosting company to a different hosting company, they wouldn't want your domain. So sometimes they actually make you move it. So just be aware of that. Okay, guys. So tell me in chat, I'm curious, where is your domain name registered? Just go ahead and open the chat. Where is your domain name registered? I'm curious. And then I'll tell you my top 5. Barb, I haven't heard of that one. IDC Soft? Nowhere. Kelly will change that. Overseas, yeah. Yeah. I have a hate and love relationship with GoDaddy. Network Solutions, okay. Yeah, see, we're seeing some patterns here. GoDaddy is obviously a huge domain registrar. Very cool, guys. I'm not seeing any red flags. The only thing that made me nervous was Wix, but I'll tell you why later. But thanks for sharing that with me. My top 5 registrars are Google Domains, and it's fairly new And when I say new, it's more like Google, Google's company policy is kind of like trying things out, like low key. And then if it goes well, then they kind of make a bigger think about it. So they've probably been doing it longer than I've noticed, but using this more mainstream is kind of new to us. So what we like about it is that it's 12 bucks per domain and it includes free privacy. Perfect, right? Domain.com, fine. GoDaddy.com, fine. Namecheap.com, Dynadot.com, all the ones you mentioned are pretty good. Network Solutions, they might be one of the ones where if you, I don't know if they would be in the domain business, but they might have outgrown that. They've been around a long time, and I'm sure that they still do that. What makes a good domain registrant? I know I'm not supposed to be looking at questions. I apologize. But let's see here. One, I think it depends how you prefer to communicate, honestly. So if you want to get someone on the phone, don't pick a company that's mostly internet-based. GoDaddy, they have their number prominently listed. That means you can call them. My favorite registrar, which is like SiteGround, they have a great chat feature, and I love that. So see how they want to help you, and then determine if that's how you're okay with that, basically. Every now and then you might have a question or something's not working or your web guy's got to call them, and it's just nice to know that they can. Okay, yeah, so there's so many to choose from, guys. You can't go too wrong so long as that you buy it yourself separate from your hosting company, because you can change your hosting company all day long and then you just point the domain to the new hosting company. So Wix, oh, I'm not going to read that. I'm going to come back to that. Stay tuned, Regina. So you can move your domain name to a different registrar. It takes 5 to 10 business days. And you can go ahead and purchase your own domain name. You don't have to leave that to your designer. If you have an account already, they'll be happy to take it. Some designers, to hurry a project along, will register the domain name under their name, because realistically, I've got to register that under your name, get your credit card information, set that up with dual authentication. So it's a little bit of a pain in the butt, right? So, and if you don't have a good feeling about your designer, don't let them do that, because it's harder to break up with them, you know, if they have like your stuff. So if you have your domain name, you're kind of free. So I've seen some bad experiences that some people have had with their designers. And so that's why we always put them in a position of education and power so they can make the best decision for them. So typically we want them to register their domain name. Okay, guys, question time. Let's see what we got. All right. Questions. Regina, I'm still not going to answer your question because it's on another slide, so hang tight. All right, what kind of questions do we have for Q&A? You don't have any? No questions? All right, guys, you got to use the Q&A so that way I won't get distracted.
I was gonna say, this was quite a few chat boxes ago, but did we answer the question on how do you find the owner if they are hidden for a domain?
Ah, okay. How do we find an owner if they're hidden from a domain? You can't if they don't want to be found. Again, if they want to be found, you'll be able to. So for example, let's say you go to a website, brandswine.com, and it's like, hey, this is taken, but it could be yours for $3,000. Contact me here. So trust me, these people who aren't doing anything with the domains want to be found, and their information might be listed, but if it's not, unfortunately. I do believe actually that in the Whois, it gives you an email address that you can use to contact the owner. Now, I might say something like abuse@godaddy.com or something, but it will actually forward to that owner's email. You just won't have the actual email.
I think we have a couple of questions on the Q&A at the moment.
Okay, let's do it.
So are you taking it or I should read it out, please?
Okay, I'll go ahead and read them. All right,
Ah.
Kelly Woods, if your startup is so tiny that you are using a Facebook page, what is the benchmark to move to getting your own website? The benchmark is yesterday. Yesterday's a benchmark. Because there's a lot of really, really inexpensive options out there that aren't a custom website. And we're going to get into that. And I think you're going to, through that, find some things that work really well for you. Even if it's a simple landing page, it's definitely confirmation that you're legit. So definitely get one, even if it's small, just so it looks nice, it represents your company, and they can contact you. That's the biggest thing. Okay. Any recommendations for hosting? Yes, I do, and I will go through my list with you. So that will be answered later. Samuel says, would you explain the caution that you gave at the beginning about keeping your domain registration different from something else? Yes, so a little bit more about that. I was working with, I believe it was Network Solutions. I can't quite recall if that's true, where they had the domain name and the name servers were there. So what that means is the domain was registered maybe at GoDaddy, but the records were living on Network Solutions. However, the client no longer wanted their website Network Solutions. So then we had to update the records to show the new hosting account. But they didn't want the records because they weren't hosting the website. So what we had to do was change the records back to GoDaddy, which can take 48 hours, and then change the records so that it reflects the new hosting account. So it can just be a little bit of a delay and a pain in the butt, and it can just confuse everybody when that happens. So yeah. Any recommendations for hosting? Yes, we're going to do that one soon. Hang tight. Georgianne, what is a typical cost to maintain a domain name a year? I would say anywhere between $12 and $30 per year. $12 if you go to GoDaddy. I'm sorry, Google, and it does include privacy. So it's pretty easy. You just have to renew it every year. Google does have a free website thing that it just launched, so I can't speak too much about how it works, but basically it's almost like a very simple Google listing, but it allows you to put some content on it and it kind of looks like a website, and I believe that is free. You still need to have a domain name, but you can point it to Google, and and they usually give you those instructions when you set that up. But yes, Google does offer a free website. It's very simple and you can't really customize it a whole lot, but it's great for a company that is just starting. Okay, let's keep going here. Yes, so Georgianne, when you say privacy, what do you mean? Is this not typical with other domains? Yes, up until this point, up until Google, you had to buy privacy. So you would spend, 15 bucks on a domain name and then another 15 bucks on privacy, so that what it does is it just hides your contact information and it uses like GoDaddy's basic information, so no one can contact you or know who you are on the public record. But now you can get privacy for free, but only through Google at this time, at least that I know of. Other registrars might be following this trend. That's a cool thing about, a competitive industry, is that we're setting new standards. All right, I'm gonna move on, but I will be here, so don't go anywhere. All right, website hosting, here we go. So do you guys know where your website is hosted? Let me know in chat where you are, and I'm gonna come back to it. I'm curious where you guys have your website hosted. Okay, so my top 5 website hosting companies is SiteGround, and they give you a free SSL certificate, and I'll go into that a little bit. Flywheel, Media Temple, InMotion, DreamHost. We no longer really recommend GoDaddy because we find they don't give you enough resources. So if your website is sluggish and it times out and you can't, it's just behaving badly, things aren't loading, then you probably need to optimize your website. Some hosts I stay away from are actually HostGator and Bluehost. I'm sorry to tell you guys. Now, if your website isn't very robust, you might not notice that there's any issue. But when using new website technologies and really dynamic website builders, we find that they just don't want to give you those resources, and you can't even really upgrade to get more. GoDaddy, we definitely don't recommend for hosting for that same reason. Now, this was probably 5 years ago that we strayed away from them. So at some point they could be better, but the resources is really important. If your website is super slow and it's not doing what it needs to do, then you know it's a hosting problem. You can also optimize your website for it to perform a little bit better by installing caching stuff. But typically we found that the hosting just isn't giving you enough resources. And in this presentation, you'll see the links, guys, and you can go ahead and visit these. But SiteGround's our favorite. It's super fast, has a free SSL on it. We really enjoy it. Okay, so let's talk about understanding the terminology so you even know what package to pick. In almost every case, the startup is just fine. And each website company, you know, they have their own names for the beginner package, but SiteGround uses the term startup. And usually this is plenty. Now, if you're hosting more than one website, then you need to go to the Grow Big or the middle section. And here it kind of gives you a breakdown. So we have a website, one website, 10 gigs of web space, which sounds like a lot, but if you aren't resizing your photos, that number can be hit quite quickly. Are you uploading videos? That number can be hit quite quickly. Unmetered traffic, which means that as many people as you want can visit your website, there isn't a meter on it. Free SSL, we talked about that. Daily backups. I'm going to skip over some of these, but free Cloudflare, that's just something that allows your website to be a little bit faster. Free email, please don't use email with your hosting providers. I'll go into that later. Security, e-commerce is allowed. You can have a managed WordPress site out of it. Out of the box caching, which means they have programs that automatically help boost your website. Unlimited databases, which means you can have as many WordPress installs that you want on there, but only one website can actually be used. That's what that means. Moving over here, again, same stuff, just more of it. And more of it. Yeah. So the big one here would just be the faster PHP. And that's just a code base that most websites are sort of run on, including WordPress. And if you're using a higher version, then it just tends to be faster, more secure. So that's sort of why they're doing that. All right. Okay, so again, if your website is sluggish, it could be your hosting account. Or you might need to optimize your website and images. So if you go to your website and you see an image like slowly load, that usually means it's really big and it just needs to be resized. All right, I'm going to take more questions now. Here we go. Anonymous. Now you know my recommendations for hosting. But yes, SiteGround is definitely my favorite. Wiz, do SiteGrounds provide customer service? Yes. You can call them, but I really prefer to text them because I'm a millennial. I really just enjoy their chat feature. They're very fast and they've always resolved my problems, honestly. So go get them. And how much does it cost? That's a good question. So I'm going to back up a second to the. So this is for the first year, they give you a big discount. And so it's like $50 a year or something. But then the next year, you're looking at like $144 a year. We absolutely, we have a special account because we do hosting. So we have a really big account that we pay hundreds of bucks a month for every month. But for normal people, you know, this is just fine. And there are a lot cheaper hosts out there, but you're not going to get the resources if you want a modern website that does things, you know, like animation. And the more robust your website is, the more it's working for you, just the more juice it needs, you know. So yes, I've answered that one with good. All right, done. Done. Okay, Kelly Woods, tell us more about a basic landing page, please. Now, I'm thinking that you might be really interested in the website builders, which is going to be down the road. So I'm going to hold your question, but I'm going to come back to it. Susan, is it advisable to change hosting company? Is it difficult? If your website is just problematic and your current host doesn't have any upgrades that are reasonably priced and will meet your needs, then definitely move hosts. SiteGround has a really great transfer. It's like 30 bucks and it'll transfer everything for you and take care of everything. And you won't even notice it's a different company, really. So yeah, only, don't fix what's not broken, but if your website just isn't working, and you know what, sometimes you won't really know until you maybe upgrade your website and realize, wow, this website why is it so slow? And then you might need to upgrade your hosting or move it to a different place. So just take it by case basis. You don't have to move it just for the sake of moving it if it's not broken. Georgianne, is an SSL standard for startup packages? Yes. Yes, because well, we're going to go into that again. You guys have really good questions today. But yes, if someone doesn't offer an SSL as part of the package, like included, then I would be a little wary. They are probably old school because back in the day, I know back in the day is rather subjective, but back in the day, it would take a little bit more to set up an SSL and you could charge, a couple $100 to install it. But now it's so plug and play that really should just be included in whatever package you're getting. Oh, however, sometimes depending on the amount of security you need, for example, let's say you're doing lots of e-commerce, maybe you're taking social security numbers or something on the website, then you can enhance the security level of that SSL, and that can be anywhere between like 50 bucks to 120 bucks a year. The basic SSL is just sort of a standard level of security, and I'll talk about that soon. All right, great questions, guys. Okay. All right, hosting alternatives, website builders. This is going to be great. Okay, here are some of the most popular builders that I've come in contact with. We have Squarespace, Wix. I know we have a Wix person here. Shopify for e-commerce, Pixpa for photographers. There's so many really cool website builders. And guys, if you're a startup and you've got like 50 bucks, like these are great options. So, and I'll kind of tell you like the ups and downs. If you're a do-it-yourselfer and you really like the experience of dragging and dropping your own website and whatever, be my guest to go here. Wix.com, Squarespace, Weebly, all of these are really good and they kind of compare different features. So, how easy is it to use, flexibility in design templates and languages support. Do they allow you to have your own domain name? And all of them do, of course. How many levels of navigation can you do? So like how many drop-down menus, widgets, which are like small fun modules you can add that do things. How good is their SEO? Do they have a blog? Do they allow contact forms? So think about, what kind of website you want to build and then just see who has it. Who has all those features. Now, usually it's between Wix and Squarespace that people need help picking. So my next recommendation at that point is who has a better looking templates? Because that's what you're picking. You're going to pick a template, you're going to customize it, it's your logo, throw some new text and images and you're, bada bing, bada boom, right? So who has a nicer looking designs? The ones that make you go, ooh, ah, that's the one you want to go for, really. If it's a tie between two different companies that are really obviously highly rated. It also depends if you want to sell products and which one's better at that. And if you're not sure what kind of website you should have, I recommend looking at your competitors, seeing what they have on there, what's industry standard, and seeing what you would like to include. Just a quick outline of things that you want, and then check it out and see if it's a wish list item. So yes, now this is a great site. The link is in the presentation, so you can take a look at this and then pick the one that works for you. Now, let's talk about the tip. Okay, so I only recommend using these for startups because you can't move your site. And I believe I can't quite recall who had that question about Wix. I'm sorry if I don't remember your name. But once you build your site and you want to move it someplace else, you can't copy it. You can, like, you know, grab the text and images you uploaded, but they use their own proprietary software, right? That only works with their stuff. So unlike WordPress, which is open source, and you can move that from hosting account to hosting account, you can't move your Wix site to another hosting account. You have to rebuild it. So if you're making a landing page, awesome. That's really easy to replicate anywhere else. And chances are, if you are moving, you're probably upgrading your design anyway, and it'll need to be redone. So just keep that in mind when choosing, you know, what website builder you're using, or using a website builder at all. But it's a great startup option, especially for a landing page. So don't let that deter you, because having a website presence is more important than kind of getting stuck with your website at Wix or Squarespace. All right, guys, more questions. All right, we talked about the basic landing page. All right. Go down to HostGator. Okay, I think I answered that. Okay, I think we're good. I must have answered all your questions. Well, let's go. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the SSL. And that just means security for online communications. Now, if you took my web security seminar, this might be a little bit of a redo, but from a different perspective. So what's an SSL? It stands for Secure Sockets Layer, hence why we call it SSL. And basically what it does is it establishes a secure connection from the browser to the server. And you know if your website's secure because you'll have that padlock here, right, on pretty much any browser. If you don't have an SSL, or it's not set up correctly, you'll have like a red thing here, and the browser will say it's not safe, and you know, it's terrible. Now, if you purchase your SSL from your hosting provider, they typically just install it for you, like GoDaddy would install it for you. But you can buy it anywhere. And having a secure connection increases your SEO as well, because Google's like, okay, we got two sites here with roughly the same information, but this one's secure, so I'm gonna put that first. They do the same thing for responsive websites as well, mobile-friendly websites. So it does give you a little bit of an edge. So although having an SSL can help, it does not prevent hackers from infecting your website. That's a different kind of security. Think of your SSL certificate like a tunnel. So it's taking you from point A to point B, and no one can attack you when you're in the tunnel, right? But what about when you leave the tunnel once you get to the server, or before you get to the tunnel? So again, you can still get infected, but at least while the information is traveling, you're okay. So a lot of technical mumbo jumbo, but it does help, but it's not foolproof. All right, taking another look at questions. Wiz, for web location, how do you purchase a domain name if you want to have a presence in a foreign market? That's a good question. First of all, I remember helping my friend get a website. He lives in Sweden, and he was able to get a Sweden domain name, but I believe you actually have to live in Sweden to get it, if I'm not mistaken. For example, a lot of domain name extensions like .dev, in order to use a .dev site, you have to have an SSL installed. So different extensions do have different requirements, but so long as you meet them, you can definitely get a website, you know, .mexico. Which can be more helpful on that one, but it really depends on the extension and what rules they have in place for it. Okay, Wiz again, can you share best practices to prevent from being hacked, and how does one recover data? That one's a bit of a longer question. However, I don't know if I can answer that in this one. That's a big question. But definitely update your plugins. Making sure your website's up to date is a big factor in that. And websites do have plugins, and I'll actually answer that question later when we talk about those specific features. All right. Well, we're just about here. Let's talk about web apps. Now, Custom or CMS. So a custom website is when your designer just codes it by hand. And that means you can't go in and edit it unless you know HTML. So typically we've moved away from that unless a company has no desire to ever edit their website. So that's getting phased out a lot. But when we're talking about big websites for like Nike and Adidas and all the big companies, they're usually using sometimes their own code base. Like they have a in-house developer who takes care of that for them and they don't have to worry about editing it. But for us small folk, we want to have the power to edit our own messaging, right? So for the most part, most of the websites that you get today are called a CMS, and that stands for Content Management System. So examples of this were WordPress, Magenta, Joomla, all those people. Now, technically, Wix and Weebly and Squarespace, they're all content management systems as well. They have a visual way for you to update your website. So all of these kind of require a certain amount of like computer savviness to get in there and put together, using a mouse, dragging and dropping, navigation, documentation, etc. When I was teaching web design at a college, I once had a student say, "Oh, I'm just here to learn how to use a computer." I'm like, "Oh, I can't teach you web design if you can't use a computer. I'm sorry." So they had to drop out of the class. But yeah, you got to know a little bit about computers for this to really feel good to you. Tips. WordPress.org, which is an open source version for developers, is not the same as WordPress.com. WordPress.com is kind of like Squarespace or Wix, except I think it's like somewhere between coder and designer. It's like sort of like a sweet spot. People who are computer savvy can usually get in and work it, but WordPress.com is just a commercial version where WordPress charges you to have a website hosted. And the .org, anyone can take that and install on their own server and run with it. And that's the kind that we use here at Brandswan. All right, so here's where a lot of your questions come in. What can a website do? And I will be honest, the more it can do, the more you can get hacked. Because when you're adding more to your website, that's just another door that someone can get in, So depending what web app you use, there could be add-ons made by a third-party developer that you can buy, or sometimes a lot of them are free, like for WordPress, to improve your website. Here are just some examples of things that you can add on to your website: event calendars, galleries, video players, online booking systems, lead capturing, contact forms, search features, appointment schedulers, online quizzes and polls, security and backup, blogs, social media feeds, tracking effectiveness of Facebook campaigns. So yes, when we're talking Wiz, about the best practices from trying to get hacked, the first one is making sure that your website and all the plugins that are attached to it are up to date. We go in once a month and make sure that happens because they patch vulnerabilities. There are a lot of really great backup software. The one I personally like for WordPress is called Updraft Plus. I'll put that in chat. There is a free version of it. So that's the backup software I like to use, and you can store it on remotely, like your Google Drive or your Dropbox, or suddenly I can't think of a single one of them. I think your own server. And you can set that to happen weekly, and you can choose to have, even daily if you'd like, several versions of them on file. And then from there, that plugin allows you to restore the data if you need to. So really, that's like a plugin feature that you would get. And again, that's called Updraft Plus, and that's the one I really prefer. If you use a really common CMS like WordPress, there's going to be more available to you to pick from. Just from experience, make sure that when you are adding a plugin to your WordPress site, make sure that it has at least 4 stars. Anything less than that, it's not good. And the more rating it has, obviously that means it's been tried and true. You can also look to see how many installs it has. If it has 100 to 1 million installs, then it's pretty solid stuff, right? So do a little bit of research on it, see what people are saying about it, and seeing how popular it is will guide you on picking your extensions and add-ons. All right, so Just FYI, all websites in this modern day are expected to have an SSL certificate and be mobile friendly. If you go to an online builder and their websites aren't mobile friendly, they're old and tired. Just don't go with them. Now, if you're going with Wix or Squarespace, chances are they're probably all mobile friendly. I can't imagine one that wouldn't be. But just be careful. If they don't say that, then that's not a good sign. And if your designer wants to charge you more for it, that's not a good sign either. All right, let's take some more questions here. Let's take a peek. Is there anyone's question I haven't answered that asked me in the Q&A? Or maybe I didn't answer it fully. Ah, yes. Yes, Rhoda, yes. Email. Nice segue. That was not set up, guys. Now, email technically wasn't part of this webinar, but we have a few minutes and I want to kind of go over it because I don't want you guys to make some mistakes I've seen other people make. So do not use the email that comes with your hosting account, please, or your domain name. Get your own provider. And hands down, I'm going to say Google G Suite 365 or whatever it's called. No, I'm mixing two. Google G Suite Workspace. They keep changing the name of it, but if you type in like G Suite or Google Workspace, you're going to get there. And that's their version of Office 365. So if you pick one of those two, you are good. Usually it's like $12 a user per month, and they give you lots of space, and it's just really great. And the cool thing about Google, having email from Google, is that even though you're using Gmail, you can still use your own custom domain name. So the two that I recommend, I'm going to go ahead and paste this in. One is the Google, it used to be called G Suite, it might be called Workplace now. And that's again the answer to Microsoft 365 and Microsoft 365. Yeah. So Microsoft has Outlook, and then G Suite uses Gmail, and both can use a custom domain name. So you don't have to have like an email address that's like, bob@gmail.com. I bet you whoever has that, man, he's probably, that's nice to have a Bob and that's it. Early days, we can't get those simple of a name anymore. They're all taken. And the reason for that is because let's say you want to swap your hosting account, but you can't cancel your account because your email's attached to it. So then you have to move your email. If you have a different email from a different company, then that's not a factor in your web experience. And really, I don't think they should be attached to one another at all. I think you should use get the best bang for your buck. And, you have experts, Microsoft and Google know what they're doing. We personally use G Suite, but yeah, pick one of those two and you're gold. Okay, so I have top email companies, but only 3. Again, this is linked for you, but Google Workspace, Office 365, and Gmail. It's free and slightly less professional, but it is good. So your company address could be, hotsauce@gmail.com. And even though it would be nice if you were like me at hotsauce.com, it's okay, it's passable. Rhoda. So basically, GoDaddy had their own email account for a while. It was just GoDaddy's email. They recently, and by recently I mean within the past 5 to 8 years, I guess, they have started reselling Office 365, but it's still Microsoft. So if you set it up through GoDaddy, it integrates with their interface, but really you do have a Google account somewhere that you just don't log into. So, so if you go to GoDaddy and you're using their Office 365 package, then you're okay. I hope that answers my question. But back in the day, I know I said that's like 20 times, I would set up emails for clients and they would have like 150 megs of space. And what's crazy is that they still have those email accounts and they're wondering why they can't send attachments. And I just wish that these companies would try to, provide better service after that. Yeah. I'm not sure about my email go through Google from Wix. Yeah, that sounds about right. Sometimes they'll help you with that, but just make sure you're not using like Wix email, but it's actually reselling Google or Office 365. And ultimately, it's always better to use a custom domain name for professionalism. If you have, Jane345@gmail.com, you're not sure they're legit. You're like, why aren't they with it? Jane at brandswan.design looks so much better. So, definitely do that. To answer your question, Regina, if you log into your account and your email anywhere says that it's like Microsoft 365, you're okay. I don't know what Wix uses specifically, but I can probably find out for you. Worst case scenario is that you're just going to have to change your email account if you leave Wix. And you can't really migrate your email from Wix to Gmail. Like if you have a Gmail account, you can migrate it to Microsoft and vice versa. So again, using a hosting or domain account email means that's probably proprietary and you can't like migrate it. Sometimes you can, but it's just a case by case basis. Okay, and then I'm gonna go over my setup real fast, guys, and then I'll come back to questions. So my setup, I use Google Workspace. I use Google Domains for my domain names. I use SiteGround for my hosting. My SSL is included on SiteGround, and I use WordPress.org for my website. So this is what I use, but again, this might not be a good setup for beginners unless you plan on growing pretty quickly, because you can cut costs by doing, simple things, maybe landing pages, things like that. So if you don't have big of a budget, Wix and Squarespace are perfectly good landing pages until you want to build your website out. Okay, let me go back to questions here. Georgianne, I know Google Workspace is BAA. Oh no, I don't know what that means. I have Office 365 and I have hunted for the information regarding if there is a built-in BAA and I could not locate any features to turn it on. Do you know about the BAA information for Outlook 365? There's a lot of BAA in there. Oh, HIPAA compliant. Okay. I work with some companies about, with that, and you definitely need an SSL installed for sure. I don't think email can get more secure than Microsoft 365 from my experience. I'm not sure I can answer the HIPAA compliant one. I know enough to be dangerous, but not enough to give legal advice. Yeah, all email is, well, let me start over. All email in the cloud is secure. They have an SSL installed. You're going to see the padlock. Back in the day, when people would set up pop accounts in Outlook, you could choose to pull the information not securely. That is probably not HIPAA compliant. You always want to force that, that secure authentication. Okay, I'm glad. That one made me a little nervous to answer, honestly. So anyway, guys, if you were kind of nearing our time here, but we do have a room for a couple more questions if you have any. Else you can schedule a call with me and I can help you out on some things, feel free. If you're interested, we have a Facebook group where we really help business owners, and people just, a mastermind group, if you will. So feel free to join if you'd like, and you'll have access to me and Jen. SEO can be tricky, especially if it's not location-based. So for example, let's say you're a life coach, but you could work anywhere, right? You still should work in your backyard and build up that reputation. So the first thing for SEO is, I will say this, is that each page should have a dedicated key phrase. So for example, if I want to be found for web designer Delaware, I need a whole page dedicated to that of at least 300 words. And you need to put the exact phrase you want to be found for strategically in certain places, like a headline and in the first paragraph and alt tags for your images. So it's a formula that you can follow in order to get your SEO up. And if you're not getting the traffic that you're looking for, chances are you might be using the wrong key phrase that people aren't actually using. Or no, actually, that's really the only thing. Or you're not using something that has really good SEO tools. So not every like online builder has a good SEO. Okay.
Okay, please, Ms. Jane, just a quick one before we continue with the questions, even as they continue coming in, I will be posting a 30-second survey about today's webinar. This is for our attendees, Our attendees, remember, we cherish your feedback, even as it helps us to improve on the services we provide to you at a low cost, and even as it's also required by our founder. So kindly take your 30 seconds and help us to fill out this 30-second survey about today's webinar. I guess we can continue, Ms. Jane.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is awesome. You guys were super engaging and you made it really fun. So thank you very much. Yeah, so I put my contact information in the chat. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. And yes, we're gonna send you the recording, right? And the presentation.
Yes, that's correct.
Perfect. Okay, guys. Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate the comments. Thank you, Wiz. All right. Well, you know where to find me. I'll talk to you guys soon.
Okay. Before we wrap it up, I want to use this opportunity to thank each and every one of you for making it a day with us. Ms. Jane, thank you for your time, your effort, and thank you for answering all the questions that were asked during the presentation. I also want to use this opportunity to thank my fellow Temple Small Business and Development team members for their hard work and swift cooperation as usual. Without further ado, and with the absence of any other question at hand, I think we can call it a day. Thank you once again for keeping it a day with us, and do have a nice day.
Thank you, everyone. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Yes, please.